The Lambton worm is a legend from County Durham in North East England in the United Kingdom. The story takes place around the River Wear and is one of the area's most famous pieces of folklore. The tale states that the young John Lambton was a rebellious character who missed church one Sunday to go fishing in the river. In many versions of the story, while walking to the river or setting up his equipment, John receives warnings from an old man that no good can come from missing church. John does not catch anything until the church service finishes, at which point he fishes out a small eel-like creature with 9 holes on each side of its salamander-like head. Depending on the version of the story, the worm is no bigger than a thumb, or about 3 feet long. In some tales it has legs, while in others it is said to resemble a snake. At this point the old man returns, and John declares that he has caught the devil, and decides to dispose of his catch by discarding it down a nearby well. The old man then issues further warnings about the nature of the beast. John then forgets about the creature and eventually grows up. As a penance for his rebellious early years, he joins the Crusades. Because the story is often said to have taken place in the 14th century, he is likely to have fought in the Barbary or Lithuanian Crusade. Eventually, the worm grows extremely large and the well becomes poisonous. The villagers start to notice livestock going missing and discover that the fully grown worm has emerged from the well and coiled itself around a local hill. The worm terrorises nearby villages, eating sheep and preventing cows from producing milk and snatching away small children. It then heads towards Lambton Castle, where the Lord, John Lambton's aged father, manages to sedate the creature in what becomes a daily ritual of offering the worm the milk of 9 good cows, 20 gallons, or a filled trough. A number of brave villagers tried to kill the beast, but they were all quickly slain. When a chunk is cut off the worm, it simply reattaches the missing piece. Visiting knights also try to assault the beast, but none survive. When annoyed, the worm uproots trees by coiling its tail around them, then creates devastation by waving around the uprooted tree like a club. After 7 years, John Lambton returns from the Crusades to find his father's estates almost destitute because of the worm. John decides to fight it, but first seeks the guidance of a witch near Durham. The witch hardens John's resolve to kill the beast by explaining his responsibility for the worm. She tells him to cover his armour in spearheads and fight the worm in the River Wear, where it now spends its days wrapped around a great rock. The witch also tells John that after killing the worm, he must then kill the first living thing he sees, or else his family will be cursed for 9 generations and will not die in their beds. John prepares his armour according to the witch's instructions and arranges with his father that, when he has killed the worm, he will sound his hunting horn 3 times. On this signal, his father is to release his favourite hound so that it will run to John, who can kill the dog and thus avoid the curse. John then fights the worm by the river. The worm tries to crush him, wrapping him in its coils, but it cut itself on his armour spikes. The pieces of the worm fall into the river and are washed away before they can join up again. Eventually, the worm is killed and John sounds his hunting horn 3 times. Unfortunately, John's father is so excited that the beast is dead that he forgets to release the hound and rushes out to congratulate his son. John cannot bear to kill his father, and so, after they meet, the hound is released and dutifully dispatched, but it is too late, and the 9 generations of Lambtons are cursed so that they shall not die peacefully in their beds. The curse seems to have held true for at least 3 generations, possibly helping to contribute to the popularity of the story. First generation Robert Lambton drowned at Newrig. The second, Sir William Lambton, a colonel, was killed at Marston Moor. Third generation, William Lambton, died at the Battle of Wakefield. Thus, the story ends. The Mowing Devil is the title of an English woodcut pamphlet published in 1678. The pamphlet tells of a farmer in Hertfordshire who, refusing to pay the price demanded by a labourer to mow his field, swore he would rather the devil mowed it instead. According to the pamphlet, a rich farmer, too mean to pay the wages which a labourer wanted for mowing his oats, angrily said that the devil himself should mow his oats before he should have anything to do with them. But God punished his greed and heartlessness. That night the oat field seemed to be on fire, yet the next morning, when the farmer went to inspect the damage, he found the crop was cut down ready to his hands, and, as if the devil had a mind to show his skill in husbandry, and scorned to mow them after the usual manner, he cut them in round circles, and placate every straw with the exactness that it would have taken up above an age for any man to perform what he did in one night, and the man that owns them is as yet afraid to remove them. This pamphlet and the accompanying illustration are often cited by crop circle researchers as among the first recorded cases of crop circles. Leading crop circle researcher Jim Shinabel does not consider it to be a historical precedent because it describes the stalks as being cut, while modern crop circles involve the wheat, barley, or, less commonly, other plants being bent. But ultimately, what do you believe? The Chetwynd Park estate was once home to the Piggott family. Squire Piggott was a neglectful husband, and when Madam Piggott did fall pregnant, the birth was not an easy one. Her doctor explained to Squire Piggott that he was unable to save the lives of both his wife and baby. Upon hearing this, the squire said only that one should lop the root to save the branch. However, the doctor's efforts were unsuccessful, and both mother and child died. Madam Piggott's spirit returned, unable to rest due to her husband's cruel words. Every night at midnight she appeared from a skylight of the old rectory in Chetwynd. Some of her favourite places were Cheney Hill, which became known as Madam Piggott's Hill, and a twisted tree root called Madam Piggott's Armchair. She might be seen walking the road between Edgemond and Newport, or sitting and combing her baby's hair. If a rider passed through the area, Madam Piggott would leap onto the horse behind him. Her spirit was unable to cross water, so when the rider crossed a stream, she would let go. The spirit was so well known in the area that 12 churchmen assembled to read the psalms and exorcise her. All but one of the clergymen gave in to exhaustion, leaving only Mr. Foy of Edgemond to continue reading. The prayers worked, but after Foy's death, the ghost returned and had to be laid once more. Georgina Frederica Jackson, who recorded the tale, mentioned an informant living in 1883 who claimed to have personally seen the ghost. Madam Piggott sightings have been recorded as recently as this year. She has been said to appear around the A41 road between Newport and Market Drayton. Long ago in Bamborough Castle once lived a king who had a fair wife and 2 children, a son named Childwind and a daughter named Margaret. Childwind was an adventurer and went forth to seek his fortune, and soon after he had gone, the queen his mother died. The king mourned her long and faithfully, but one day, while he was hunting, he came across a woman of great beauty, and fell so much in love with her that he was determined to marry her. so he sent word home that he was going to bring a new queen to Bamborough Castle. Princess Margaret was not very glad to hear of her mother's place being taken, but she did not make her feelings known and did her father's bidding. At the appointed day, she came down to the castle's gate with the keys, ready to hand them over to her stepmother. Soon the procession drew near, and the new queen came towards Princess Margaret, who bowed low and handed her the keys to the castle. She stood there with blushing cheeks and eyes on the ground and said, "Oh, welcome, father dear, to your halls and dwelling, and welcome to you, my new mother, for all that's here is yours." And again she offered the keys. One of the king's knights who had escorted the new queen cried out in admiration, "Surely this northern princess is the loveliest of her kind." At that the new queen flushed and cried out, "At least your courtesy might have accepted me." And then she muttered below her breath, "I'll soon put an end to her beauty." That same night the queen, who was secretly a witch, stole down to a lonely dungeon, wherein she did her magic, and with spells 3 times 3, and with passes 9 times 9, she cast Princess Margaret under her spell. And this was her spell: "I weird ye to be Ladly Worm, and borrowed shall ye never be, until Childwing, the king's own son, come to the hew and thrice kiss thee. Until the world comes to an end, borrowed shall ye never be." Lady Margaret went to bed a beautiful maiden, and rose a Ladly Worm. And when her maidens came in to dress her in the morning, they found coiled up on her bed a dreadful dragon, which uncoiled itself and came towards them. But they ran away shrieking, and the Ladly Worm crawled and crept, and crept and crawled, till it reached the hew or rock of the Spindleton, round which it coiled itself, and lay there basking, with its terrible snout in the air. Soon the land had reason to know of the Ladly Worm of Spindleton Hew. Hunger drove the monster out from its cave, and it would devour anything it came across. So at last the people went to a mighty warlock and asked him what they should do. Then he consulted his works and familiar and told them, "The Ladly Worm is really Princess Margaret, and it is hunger that drives her forth to do such deeds. Put aside for her 7 cows, and each day as the sun goes down, carry every drop of milk they yield to the stone trough at the foot of the hew, and the Ladly Worm will trouble the country no longer. But if ye would that she be borrowed, and her natural shape, and that she who bespelled her be rightly punished, send over the seas for her brother, Childwind." All was done as the warlock advised. The Ladly Worm lived on the milk of the 7 cows, and the country was troubled no longer. But when Childwind heard the news, he swore a mighty oath to rescue his sister and take revenge upon their stepmother. His men took the oath with him, and they set to work and built a longship. When all was ready, they set out with their oars and pulled with all their strength for Bamborough. But as they got near the keep, the stepmother felt by her magic power that something was being wrought against her. So she summoned her familiar imps and said, "Childwind is coming over the seas. He must never land, raise storms, or bore the hull, but by no how must he touch this shore." Then the imps went forth to meet Childwind's ship, but when they got near, they found they had no power over the ship, for its keel was made of the rowan tree. So back they came to the queen, who knew not what to do. She ordered her men-at-arms to resist Childwind if he should land near them, and by her spells she caused the Ladly Worm to wait by the entrance of the harbour. As the ship came near, the worm unfolded its coils, and, dipping into the sea, caught hold of the ship and banged it off the shore. 3 times Childwind urged his men to row bravely and strong, but each time the Laidly Worm kept it off the shore. Then Childwin ordered the ship to be put about, and the Witch Queen thought he had given up the attempt. But instead of that, he only rounded the next point and landed safe and sound at Buddle Creek, and then, with sword drawn and bow bent, rushed up, followed by his men, to fight the terrible worm that had kept him from his landing. But the moment Childwind had landed, the Witch Queen's power over the Laidly Worm had gone, and she went back to her chambers all alone, not an imp nor man-at-arms to help her, for she knew her hour had come. So when Childwind came rushing up to the Laidly Worm, it made no attempt to stop him or hurt him, but just as he was going to raise his sword to slay it, the voice of his own sister Margaret came from its jaws, saying, "Oh, quit your sword, unbend your bow, and give me kisses free, for though I'm a poisonous worm, no harm I'll do to thee." Childwind stayed his hand, but he did not know what to think, and feared that further witchcraft was at play. Then the Laidly Worm said again, "Oh, quit your sword, unbend your bow, and give me kisses free, for though I'm a poisonous worm, no harm I'll do to thee." Then Childwind went up to the Laidly Worm and kissed it once, but no change came over it. Then kissed it a second time, but still no change came over it. For a third time he kissed the loathsome beast, and with a hiss and a roar the Laidly Worm reared back, and before Childwind stood his sister Margaret. He wrapped his cloak about her, and together they went up to the castle. When they reached the keep, Childwind went off to the witch's chamber, and when he saw her, he touched her with a twig of a rowan tree. No sooner had he touched her, she shrivelled up until she became a huge ugly toad, with bold staring eyes and a horrible hiss. She croaked and she hissed, and then hopped away down the castle steps, and Childwind took his father's place as king, and they all lived happily ever after. But to this day a loathsome toad is seen at times haunting the neighbourhood of Bamborough Keep, and the wicked Witch Queen is that Laidly Toad.